Hi everyone, this is the fourth video in my four-part series on principles for the opening, middle game, end game and general principles that can apply in all positions. So in this video we'll look at my 15 top tips that can apply to any position, and this should really help with you joining up the principles mentioned in all the other videos. And if you stick through to the end, I'll even chuck in a bonus tip, so stay tuned for that one. As always, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to never miss a video, and if you're enjoying these videos then do smash that like button to help this video reach more people. So my first top tip is make a plan. This is a subject I've talked extensively on in a two-part video series, so I'll link that on screen now if you want to check it out afterwards. And the reason I push this message so much is that it's extremely important to make a plan based on the characteristics of the position, so that then you're moving your pieces around the board with a wider strategic objective in mind. You're not just playing for tricks and blunders from your opponent. And this brings us on to our second top tip, which is don't just play for tricks and expect your opponent to blunder. So in this position it's white to move, and if white had made a plan before making a move, he'd have understood the fact that he needs to bring his rook to the A file in order to fight for this open file and look to invade the position and gain an advantage. However, if white were playing for tricks, then he might make a move like rook to D1, setting up the threat of bishop takes F7 check, and then picking up the rook on D6. But the problem with this is that the black player can now simply sidestep with the rook to A6, and now black is the one that's gained control over this open file, and the position has gone from significantly better for white to actually being worse for white now. And this brings us on to our third and fourth top tip. The third top tip being always consider your opponent's moves in response to yours. We can often get very wrapped up in our own ideas that we don't actually consider what our opponent is trying to do. And if white had done that here, then they would have realised that black also wants to bring a rook to the A file, and the minute that they do so, their own threat of picking up the rook with a discovered check is going to fail the minute black executes on their own plan. And my fourth top tip, which is related to this, is don't push your opponent's pieces to squares that they want to be on anyway. So we can see that the rook is much better on the A file than it was on the D6 square, and by white setting up this tactical shot, all they did was force their opponent to make a move which they wanted to make anyway. The same can be seen with minor pieces. There are times in a game of chess where knights are out on bad squares, maybe at the side of the board, and equally we have moments where bishops are on bad squares, not really actively contributing into the game. And if we start chasing these pieces around with our pawns, unless it's connected with a wider plan that helps our position, we may well be just chasing those pieces to better squares anyway. My fifth top tip is focus on positional chess, as opposed to simply looking to memorize openings, for example. That's one of the big focuses of this channel, is to help grow your positional understanding, so do check out my videos around this subject. And I've also added a link down below in the description of this video to a fantastic book all about positional chess called How to Reassess Your Chess by I.M. Jeremy Silman. So I would highly recommend to follow that link, get a copy of that book if you can do so, and it will really help grow your positional understanding. And another great way to build your positional understanding in chess is by studying the classics of grandmasters, past and present. And I've got on screen here a position taken from a classical game played between Nigel Short with the white pieces and Jan Timman with the black pieces. It's white to move, and as we can see, white has built up a dominant position. His rooks are dominating the open file here. He has more space across the board. His queen is very actively placed on this F6 square, and it's now about trying to figure out how to put in motion a winning sequence that will lead to a victory. And Nigel Short finds a really nice solution to this problem. So if you want to pause the video here and have a think about what he played, then I'd encourage you to do so. There are many good moves here, but what Nigel played was king to h2. And this set up the really nice idea of marching the king into the position all the way to this h6 square, where it can then deliver checkmate on g7 with the queen. So if we play a few moves through here, we can see that black was shuffling the rooks on the back rank, white keeps bringing the king in, black continues to shuffle now with the bishop attacking the white's rook, and here Short simply ignores that threat and plays king to g5. And Timman resigned here because even after the black bishop takes this rook, now white plays king h6, and this mate threat is unstoppable. And as well as studying chess classics, I would also, for my 7th top tip, highly recommend you focus on endgames. Again, because if you can gain an understanding of this crucial aspect of the game, it will hugely help your middle game, for example, because you'll have that good sense of when to exchange pieces and when not to exchange pieces, and what positions you're actually trying to head towards to give yourself a winning advantage. And my 8th top tip is that you should look to play stronger players if you can do so. So as well as studying the games of stronger players, if you can actually play stronger players, say online or through your local chess club, then it will really help your understanding, especially if you can then sit down with them and analyse your games afterwards. So my 9th top tip is make sure you analyse your games after you've played them. Especially when you're playing online blitz chess, it can be very easy to just throw the pieces around and not really consider what you're doing and how you could have improved in a position. So I'd always recommend, if you can do so, try and take that step back after each game or each few games and analyse where you went wrong. Especially it will help you look for tactical shots in the position. And this brings us on to our 10th top tip, which is work on your tactics. So here we can see it's white to move, and white has a simple one-shot move that will give a winning position. So if you want to pause it and look for the move, please do so. Here white can play queen takes knight on g6, and because the pawn on f7 is pinned, black can't recapture, and white has won a piece and will go on to win the game. So although making a plan is very important and doing all the other things I've mentioned, you also have to have that good tactical awareness, and especially if you're at the lower end of the rating scale and you're very much still improving your chess, then working solely on your tactics is one of the biggest recommendations I could give. And I did do a video all about tactics, which I'll link on screen now. So if you want to check that one out, then do so, because there I go into a bit more detail about how you can practice your tactics, where you can do it, and why it's so important to regularly work at it. And my 11th top tip is know when to look for combinations. So again, I did do a video covering this subject, which I'll link on screen now. But the key thing to remember here, it's all well and good doing puzzles when you're told that there's a mate in the position or a winning move for one of the sides, but it's quite another thing to actually play that combination at the board when no one's standing over your shoulder saying there's a win here for one side. Instead, you need to have a sense of when to look for tactics in the position, especially because your time will be ticking down in a real game of chess, and so you can't necessarily start looking very deeply for tactics all over the board in every single position. However, if you can build up a sense of when there's very likely to be tactics in the position, based on the tips I give in my combinations video, then that will massively help you use your time effectively to look for those combinations. And this brings us on to our 12th top tip, which is use your time effectively. And I will be doing a video covering this subject, but one of the best pieces of advice I can give here comes back to that top tip number 1 around making a plan. So if you've made a plan and you understand your high level aims in the position, then it's a lot easier to start making moves more quickly, because you understand which squares you're trying to bring your pieces to in order to execute upon that plan. So when you reach a position when, say, the opening phase is done, you're moving into that middle game, and you now need to think more specifically about what plan you need to move forward with, I wouldn't underestimate the investment of time that's needed at that point, because if you do put the time in then more likely than not, it will actually save you time later in the game because you're very clear on your overall intentions. And my 13th top tip is blunder less. And again, this may sound obvious, but especially at the lower levels of chess, the players who blunder the least are actually the most likely to go on to win the game. It's usually a blunder that decides the game at one level or another when you're below around, let's say, 2200 FIDE. I did do a video on how to blunder less, which I'll link on screen now. And so do check that one out for my top tips on how to blunder less. My 14th top tip is, if you see a good move, look for a better one before you play it. So a good move for white here is to play the knight into g5, attacking this pawn on f7, and therefore forcing black to move his knight from f6 to d5, now committing the same piece twice in the opening, because if the pawn on e6 moves, then white can simply crash through with knight takes f7, and after king takes, the queen is coming in and giving checkmate on f7. However, if we run back to this position, we can see that there's actually a much better move than knight g5. If you want to pause the video and see what it is, then do so. White can actually play knight d6 checkmate, because the pawn on e7 is pinned to the king by the queen on e2. So if you see a good move, always look for a better one before going with that. And my 15th tip is a more general one, and that's get some rest. And by that I mean get some sleep if you can. So say you have a big tournament coming up at a weekend, try and be well rested the night before, because in my own experience, the more well rested you can be ahead of a game of chess, the better you'll actually perform, and you'll get more value from prioritizing that than say staying up late and going over a ton of opening preparation, for example. And equally with online chess, it's very easy to fall into the habit of just playing dozens and dozens of online games without actually analysing and just throwing pieces around until you're very tired. So again, if you're trying to improve, I'd recommend that you avoid doing that where you can. Look to analyse after each game, and if it is late and you've been playing a long time, getting that rest is always going to help your game and your rating more than just endlessly playing lots of games of chess. And my final bonus tip is have fun. So it's really important to have fun when you're playing chess, and the more you are enjoying it, the more you'll probably see your rating in your chess start to improve. So definitely keep enjoying your chess, even as you go on this journey of looking to get better and win more games. So I hope you found these general tips really helpful. As always, if you have any comments or questions, please do leave them down below. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and I hope to see you again in another video.